A very good evening to you. I am Lisa Lord, and my special guest is an educator and former manager of the National Council on Substance Abuse, Miss Tessa Chaderton Shaw. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Lisa, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. Now, you were part of a three-member panel which conducted a departmental inquiry into the government industrial school, and this would have followed allegations of abuse and mistreatment at the institution. One of the overarching concerns highlighted was that there is a high level of dysfunction among families in Barbados, and you've gone on record as saying that.
Yeah.
Now, let's start by looking at the issue of ineffective parenting and how it plays a huge role in what we're seeing among some of our at-risk youth in particular.
Yeah, well, before I get there, just let me acknowledge my fellow panelists.
Sure.
Former Deputy Commissioner Ora Williams and Mrs. Corinne Kennedy Tate, former principal at QC. Now, the issue of parenting or lack thereof was a very serious, one of the core components that came out from our investigation. I just want to make it very clear, I'm not here to discuss the findings of the report. I'm not here to speak about any staff member or any allegations. I'm strictly pulling out a component that I think is very important to the functioning of our society, and that is parenting. And that is why I use the term parenting is serious business. I too am a parent of two daughters. I've been an educator, as you know. I've been an advocate for mental health. One of my daughters happens to have mental health challenges. But parenting is serious business because we are bringing a life into the world, or lives into the world, and we do not plan for it. I read this statement that says in one of these memes, and it says a lot. A loving atmosphere in your home is the foundation of your life. Your home environment should be your sanctuary, your haven, a place of comfort and solace, and that we did not see.
Well, let's start to break down the whole issue of dysfunctional families and the lack of parenting in many instances that you would have seen. We know the issue of, we have the issue of the breakdown of the family. Grandparents now are working, parents are working, and sometimes siblings, the older siblings, are left to take care of their younger siblings. Let's start there.
Well, let me just start also by saying that there's no perfect family.
Of course.
All families have challenges, and I do not wish this to be seen as just a problem of the poor here in Barbados, because there are families from the middle class and upper classes who would also have challenges, but also have the resources and the wherewithal to get help. But where it comes to the poor, I think they suffer the most, and by extension, their children. Parenting is serious business because we are bringing a life into the world, or lives into the world, that need to be nurtured and supported and loved and affirmed and valued. And self-esteem is a very important factor in terms of making that child feel valued and that you're worth something, as opposed to saying you're worthless, you're just like your father, or you're worthless, you're just like your mother. You know, I never grew up hearing those things. But as I said, there's no perfect family. We all have challenges. I am one of 4 girls. I was raised by a very strict father, and but that's one thing. The other thing is when you don't parent at all.
Right. Which is why I was asking about the older siblings taking care of the younger
Right.
siblings.
So that is also a factor, because mothers now are younger, they are working. Grandmothers now are working, partying. They don't have time to play that grandparenting role. So like our society, I would say the underbelly of our society is very sick, and we need a lot of help. Parents need a lot of help. So yes, we do have situations where older siblings are taking care of younger siblings. We do have a situation where some parents have said, I should have aborted you. These things impact children.
Yeah.
Children are like sponges. They do not come into the world with manuals. I have two different children. I never had any manuals, but I did read up about parenting and about the milestones that need to be met. Yeah. The need to go to a pediatrician, whether that's in the public health sector or the private sector. But there's certain milestones that need to be met. But loving your child, and not loving your child by giving them tablets and cell phones and brand name gear. That is not love. And a lot of our children suffer from love.
Lack of love.
Lack of love. A lot of our children have a parent who is either in prison or deceased. They have been abused sexually, physically, emotionally. We have some serious work to do.
Now that you mentioned abuse, I want to go back a little bit. I know that we're not discussing the findings of the report into GIS. However, some of the wards or inmates that are at GIS were sentenced there after wandering. Right. Wandering carried an automatic sentence of 3 years.
Right.
But when you do your investigations, these girls, in many instances, left home because of varying levels of abuse.
Because of the dysfunction in the home, because of overcrowding in the home, because of abuse in the home, because they felt that Somerville or Barrows, as they were called in the past, were havens, and some would actually commit crime to get back to Somerville or to Barrows, where there would be a little more stability, some sort of love being extended to them. We have to take a serious look at starting a national parenting program so that parents, when they come through either the polyclinic system or through private pediatricians or family doctors, can be offered the opportunity to attend a parenting program, both for the mother and the father. But I do believe that our whole value system has changed.
I was about to ask what has changed from our parents years ago to new age parents.
But there's no discipline. There's no discipline. And I in fact, there's abuse. And I will share something with you that has nothing to do with the investigation that I observed in a rural community. I will not call the community, but there was I hiking with friends, and I heard this child bawling. Now, I know the cry. Most mothers know the cry of a young baby as opposed to a toddler as opposed to a 12-year-old. But there was someone, I couldn't see the person, with something like a broomstick. And all I could see is a stick going up and down and this child being brutalized. It was very jarring for me, especially having come out of the experience of the inquiry.
But let me counter that by saying I've heard horror stories from persons older than me and the discipline that they received years ago.
Well, that is true too. There are people who were beaten
With anything.
with a leather strap that would have been soaked in salt water. Right? There are children of yesteryear, let's say my mother's generation, who would have been put to kneel for an hour.
In rice.
Or you have to stand up with books on your head, and a lot of that is abuse, and that is why UNICEF has been such a strong advocate for child's rights. Having said that, I need to say, with rights come responsibilities, because things have become a little askew for me, where young people seem to think, well, I have these rights, so you can't touch me.
I've
But
heard that.
you're living under my house. You are a minor. You're not paying the bills. But with rights come responsibilities. So if I give you chores, if I give you certain tasks to do, all of that is part of family life. But with rights come responsibilities. Yes, so I have a right to provide you with safe shelter, with food, with proper shelter, love, and all those things. But you also have a responsibility to me. And I think that's where we have fallen down, in that the messages seem to be very mixed. And the children think that they have all the rights, so you can't touch me.
Which presents a challenge for parents.
Exactly. But we still have to know how to parent and where to draw the line. And sometimes we have to say no. Parenting is an investment in time, in money, in things like supervision, love, guidance, support, discipline, affirming that child, supporting that child, boosting the child's self-esteem. It's not about just giving the child whatever they want. I remember an experience while I was at NCSA where we had a prevention program for young people. And this particular Saturday, there were some young teenagers, and they were running up and down the stairs. And this one child had a glass in her hand, and the glass fell and broke, and she got cut. And we dealt with it. She was taken to a facility for treatment. But when the mother actually showed up, the mother was more concerned, and the mother replied in this way to the child: "You buy the hair from in town yet?" She showed no concern, from my recollection, about the fact that her child had been injured, that we had taken her to a private medical facility. She was more concerned about the hair that she was sent to buy. Our priorities and our value system have become all topsy-turvy. It's about hair and nails and false eyelashes, and everything false except the genuine love and care that we need to extend to these children.
Earlier, we spoke about abuse and girls in particular running away from situations where the homes might be abusive. That brings into focus the issue of early sexual initiation and what problems that creates down the road.
Yeah. Well, that is another serious risk factor. We have a situation in some of our homes with overcrowding. We have a situation where mothers turn a blind eye to their daughters being sexually abused by relatives, by family friends.
Sometimes by the mother's partner.
Sometimes by the mother's partner. Sometimes by the grandmother's partner. And the child is seldom believed when this is revealed. In fact, I remember one case where an individual slept with a knife under her pillow because she was so afraid. So there's a lot of abuse. People in communities know about it. They keep their mouth shut. They don't report these things. And mothers, as I said, tolerate this behavior that only goes to further, what should I say, leads to further abuse, further alienation from the home, and then they want to run from home. So the whole issue of wandering, which will change when the legislation is passed, is a very serious one. No child is going to run from a home where love is demonstrated, love and kindness and support. You don't run from a sanctuary, but you run if you're abused. You run if you are told that I never wanted you in the first place, or in here too crowded, so you got to find somewhere to live. Or
you've heard of situations where mothers tell their children, you cannot stay here because there's too many people.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. That is why we also have this block culture, because there are many people living in small homes, sharing tight spaces.
But again, we would have heard of situations growing up where your grandmother raised 10 children in a 2-bedroom dwelling.
Correct, but guess what? Our value system was very different. Our grandmothers or our mothers certainly instilled values in us of respect, and respect for self, respect for others. Church was a very important socializing factor. Sunday school, we had no choice.
I know.
I had to go to Sunday school, go to church in the morning, and Sunday school in the afternoon at 3 at St. Cyprian's Church. And then there was confirmation classes. But I don't only want to focus on the church as important as it is, but extracurricular activities, Girl Guides, the 4-H. You know, parents need to take time to ensure that children are exposed to positive things and not to what I would call the so-called bashment culture.
In most of the cases over the years that you would have worked closely with, is it a case where you see many times, and I'm not necessarily singling out fathers, but we know in a lot of cases, fathers tend not to be there like mothers. And in some cases, some children do not even know who their father is. We don't really hear about that today as in years gone by.
Well, based on what we gathered, many of the young people did not know their father. Or they knew the father existed, but they didn't really know the father. And the father, in a lot of cases, had other children from other women, and they didn't know their siblings at all.
In a small country like Barbados.
Right. Some of these children have been put in institutionalized care, like children's homes from the age of 2, because either the mother was not able to cope or the mother just didn't want the child.
Or parents were deceased as
Right,
well, and
parents
families
were
couldn't
deceased,
take
or
them.
there was no family support. But this affects the psyche of the child. And we also need to talk about the mental health of these children who are traumatized by some of these risk factors that surface in the home. Significant trauma that would lead to suicide.
No, mental health on its own is a very vast area, and I want to give it its proper treatment. So we'll take a quick break here. Stay with us. You're watching One on One.
Trees save lives. The Ministry of Environment and National Beautification invites all Barbadians to compete in the National Tree Planting Competition, which starts on November 7th and runs until November 21st. The successful entrant planting the most trees will win a prize of $15,000. Second prize, $5,000. Third prize, $3,000. Register on theplanting.org for further details. Let's beautify Barbados, and remember, trees save lives.
Welcome back. We're chatting with educator and former manager of the National Council on Substance Abuse, Ms. Tessa Chaderton Shaw. Before the break, we were talking about mental health. You had just touched on it. And we know that we're more aware now of children suffering with mental health disorders, from anxiety to depression. Usually when people hear mental health, they think automatically you need to be institutionalized, but there are a lot of other disorders that occur. And at the top of the program, you were very transparent when you said that you have a daughter who also has challenges.
Correct.
And how has that been as a parent dealing with that?
Very difficult. Very difficult. It has been a 15-year journey for me. And, but I saw certain red flags in her in adolescence. And, you know, the tables kind of turned on me, because it was interesting that I was in a position where I often referred addicts and alcoholics or their family members to psychologists or psychiatrists. But now here was I needing to take my own child to a psychiatrist. We also need to, I just want to say generally about mental health, start using words like, we need not be afraid of the word psychiatrist or the psychiatric hospital. Or we need to stop using words like shrink and the mental. Just like we go to the QAH, some people, they have not a sickness of the body, a sickness of the mind. Now, mental health is really our ability to cope with life's challenges. Every day we have challenges. And it's how we respond. Are we going to lash out? Are we going to be calm with disappointment and then navigate the problems? Mental health is critical to our daily existence. And some days we have sad days, and some days we have fantastic days. That applies to all of us.
Exactly.
But where children are in environments where there is a toxicity in the home, dysfunction in the home, some of these children become depressed.
Yeah.
It might be congenital. They might have been born with depression and it has not been diagnosed, or it might be episodic. In other words, a child who lost a parent, whose parent died, that is very traumatic. a child who knows that his mother or father is now in jail, that is traumatic. So depression surfaces, or self-harm, self-mutilation.
Have you encountered a lot of that?
I would just say it happens in Barbados. And if you read the literature, self-harm is a tendency that in the mind of the abuser, it is a form of release.
Yeah.
Whether they start cutting with a razor, or they start hurting themselves in other ways. It's also attention-seeking behavior, and it is saying that there is a problem.
Do you think that it's a case as well where parents think that children should not be under pressure? So you had a rough day at school, you're studying for exams, but you're not paying any bills, so what pressure do you have? Because I've heard that.
Well, I think parents and children nowadays don't communicate enough. And part of the reason why we don't communicate enough is because we have all of these technological devices that have become parents to some degree. I've been into a restaurant once and saw a mother with a toddler. And the first thing she does to settle the child is to put a tablet. And this child is probably 9 months in a high chair, maybe a year. So the technology is good on one hand, but it's disastrous on another.
And there's the pressure of social media as well.
Exactly. So as parents, we also have to set boundaries. We have to set guidelines, like, you can use this, but just for half an hour, because your homework is now far more important. Also on social media, they're exposed to a lot of sordid things, pornography. And they're also seeing that in the home as well. Parents having sex in front of their children. Again, because of lack of space. And as I said, the underbelly of Barbados, in my estimation, is very sick. Yes, we look around and it's beautiful and we want tourists and all of that. But I'm talking about people who genuinely need help. The other issue is there are many agencies that can help children and parents, like the welfare department and Parados, and have the child care board and all that. But they also suffer from a shortage of resources. Yeah. There's a backlog of cases. And then some people get twisted around in the system. Some children are also led into prostitution to support the family.
Have you seen that on a worrying scale?
I can't tell you the extent of the scale, but it does happen.
Well, we know it happens.
It does happen. I am aware of a situation where a young lady was sexually abused, and she now enjoys a particular nightlife that is perhaps not as wholesome as it should be.
And all of that leads back to the whole early sexual initiation.
Yeah. As I said, I don't wish to identify anyone, but prostitution, sex trafficking, drug trafficking, all of these things are going on in our homes. And if you speak to the team from the Domestic Violence and Family Conflict Unit within the Barbados Police Service, they have a wonderful team, and they are dealing with a lot of these cases within the home.
And this brings us back to the whole issue of parenting. You have a daughter. She goes to school. You give her an allowance of, let's say, $15 a day. But she is seen with all kinds of things that you did not buy her. But you're not asking her how she
Questions.
got them.
Yeah, very important factor there, because I used to intentionally search my children's bags at the end of the week.
Their parents who are scared to search their
Well,
children's
I'm not. I
things.
was never scared. I buy in the bag anyway. I need to know, and I would see notices that I should have received, or a sandwich that has been rotten in the bag. But I made it my business to search their bags. But again, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes,
You need to be invested in your child.
right. Yeah, and I said that it's
Yeah.
an investment in a life that is, a life is precious. The child didn't ask to be here. You brought the child here, but it comes with a serious responsibility.
Do you find that a lot of our children are struggling with their sexual identity or orientation? I'm not going to touch any surveys or anything, but it is something that you're seeing.
Yeah, that too is come on. I am not homophobic by any stretch of the imagination. I worked in HIV/AIDS with a grassroots organization in Toronto, and we would like to think that everyone is heterosexual, but that is not the case. We've had homosexuality for decades. It's just it was very taboo, but now we're more able to talk about it.
But it's gone beyond heterosexual, homosexual.
Well, now we have this thing about, are you he, she, it, or they, or non-binary? But there's also that. But how do we, I'm thinking about the poor parent who is struggling to make ends meet. Is there time to have a sit down to talk about what is going on? What are you feeling? What are your thoughts? You have a daughter who loves girls as opposed to boys.
And sometimes it's hard for the parent to accept as well.
That's true.
So it's an uncomfortable conversation, in
It's an
fairness to the
uncomfortable-
parent.
Yeah, it's an uncomfortable conversation. But I know many people in this society, even family members who are gay. And you have to keep loving them. It's hard. It's maybe not what was in our realm of expectations, but it's life. And now, in this modern era of 2022, we have to be, what is it, call it, gender neutral. We have to cater to anyone. My daughter was once admitted to a facility for youth. I don't want to go into details, but she was asked, how do you identify as she, he, or it? So I looked at her and allowed her to answer that question. So we are living in a very different age now. Transgender, people having all sorts of sex changes, and they don't want to be identified by a pronoun. They want to be called they. These are difficult discussions for parents even to wrap their heads around. But again, it is the brain. It is a matter of the X and Y chromosomes and a whole set of factors. I don't think any child gets up one morning and decides, I want to be a lesbian today, or I want to be gay today. Some of this is, what should I say? That is how they are born. It has much to do with the function in the brain and We can't knock it out of a person. Okay? And I think Barbados is generally a very tolerant society. We have not had the type of violence that I have seen in, say, in Jamaica, where members of the gay community get stoned, murdered. We are a very tolerant society, but yet these are issues that parents have to deal with and learn. And just as you follow people on social media, you can Google these things and get information to try to understand. The other thing I want to highlight is lack of support from the wider family.
Yeah, relatives.
Relatives. That is very important. And oftentimes, because you have a child who may seem to be different, or some may even say mad, which I don't like to use that word, mad, crazy, they step away. Whereas this person really wants to be loved, to be hugged, to be valued, to be affirmed, to
So
be
you
supported.
don't have that village. And that's why parenting now is even harder than 30 years ago.
And even harder now with COVID, because we're still not seeing people.
Yeah.
Some of my neighbors, I just have not seen. We may wave at each other, but we also have to also grapple with this transitioning back to a level of normalcy. You are here, all of us are here, we don't have to wear masks, but I'm happy that we can have this conversation here without having to sanitize
Or having to do it online.
or having to do it online, which loses that personal contact. I really struggled with teaching online because I feed off the energy of my students. But that was very hard, and even harder for primary school and secondary school children.
How big of an issue is bullying?
Bullying is still very much in our society. You may have heard of Supreme Counseling
Yes.
with Sean Clark, and I saw recently that both Sean and Corey Lane, the new MP under the Office of the Attorney General,
Minister of State?
right, Minister of State in that ministry, is was launching or they had come to the end of a program on bullying. Bullying too is a tendency that arises within the child who is not being noticed at home, not being loved. So you lash out at others.
Yeah.
You lash out at others because you want to be known, whether it's for good reasons or what, but you lash out at the weaker child, the child who may appear to have more than you do, the child who probably has lunch money or lunch to eat. So you lash out because you're not getting that at home. And the bully needs as much help as a person who is bullied. But normally the bully is exerting power over a weaker person. And that is something that is still part of our society. And I think various schools have embraced Supreme Counseling's prevention program against bullying. But that too came up in our discussions. Children who are exposed, whose mothers, particularly mothers, are in multiple relationships, right? Different men coming through the home, right?
Or they're living in different homes.
Right. Or they're moving.
Yes.
A child who is constantly moving from home to home. it does not provide stability for that child. It is not a good trend to inculcate moving all the time. The child is not able to stabilize him or herself, and because of the love for this man or whatever, they are moving from parish to parish, and then sometimes moving from school to school, and that becomes very disruptive. But children need love, they need guidance, they need structure. Structure is very important. A structured day. Chores, making your bed in the morning, you know, there are days we would hear where children had to get up at 5, 6 o'clock and go and take out sheep and feed animals and all of that. Or young people today don't know anything about that. So love, attention, guidance, structure, support, and support from the wider community. You know, we often hear the expression, it takes a village to raise a child. But now we're at a situation where we don't want to get involved in nobody's business because we might get taken down, right? We also have this issue of gun violence, which is rife. I think to date we've had 35 murders for this year. And all of this just didn't start yesterday. These are young men whose behaviors were problematic from school, from within the home. And nothing, no type of support, no type of counseling was offered. That is another factor, or willingness to go for counseling. Because these things, like mental health, or like homosexuality, or the whole gender factor, are seen as very taboo.
Yeah, there's still a stigma attached.
Still very taboo to say, well, I'm going to see a psychiatrist, or I'm going to my therapist, or I'm going to my psychologist. We need to move and I know as a small society, it's perhaps harder because it's not like if I'm in Toronto with 25 million people and I am just a number and nobody knows who I am. So there's also this fear of going to a therapist and maybe recognizing someone you know. And I have experienced that myself. And I said, it's okay. It's okay.
But you know, one of the major things I've heard with people not wanting to seek counseling is the issue of confidentiality. We are a very, very small island. And I'm not saying that, you know, they live by a certain set of rules. They're guided by a certain set of principles. But everybody has a friend, and that's how people think.
Lisa, confidentiality is a big issue. But any professional worth his or her salt, confidentiality is key.
Of course.
You do not disclose. With a minor, it's different. Because if you have a child who is under the age of 16, chances are you're taking that child yourself to get help. And the doctor should be able to explain, whether it's a family doctor, psychiatrist, psychologist, should be able to tell you, or in fact, the parent needs to be involved in that consultation to find out what's going on. Why is my child depressed? Why is my child withdrawn? Why is my child not participating in family activities? Why is my child using drugs? What has led to this? But the challenge comes now when the child is now becomes an adult. That information is confidential. So I cannot call my daughter's psychiatrist and say, well, What did you all discuss today? No. But as I said, any practitioner worth his salt or her salt, providing psychiatric care, psychological care, or any type of counseling, even marital counseling, it is confidential information. And whatever is shared in that room should stay in that room. I also tell that to my students who I teach, because in talking about drug and alcohol abuse, they share things that happen. And I say, whatever is shared here stays here. In fact, it goes right through my head. I don't even remember sometimes, but I don't expect them to then go and put it on Facebook. But it is a big factor. And I think we are a small society and we like to talk, and we seem to enjoy talking about the bad more than the good, because bad news sells.
So to surmise, we've discussed quite a bit dealing with dysfunctional families and parenting in particular. Now, you said you would like to see a situation where once a woman becomes pregnant, she and her partner, once the partner is willing, the child's father, that they are taken through parenting classes and it becomes mandatory. That is where we are at now in Barbados.
I think, yes, it doesn't have to be. I think a 4-6 week program is enough. I'm not saying 3 months, 6 months, but I think that just as we go to, what you call it, Lamaze classes and birthing classes. The word isn't coming to me, but I remember my husband and I going to classes about breathing techniques and how to support the mother through labor. We need to offer the same in relation to the child that is about to be born. And having a child requires planning. And it also requires planning from a physical standpoint in terms of taking care of your body. I also talk about that to my students, that if you are on drugs or a heavy drinker, those are also risk factors for the development of a healthy baby. And a lot of men think that by drinking Hennessy and sea moss and all of these concoctions, that it enhances sexual performance. But actually, it's doing just the opposite. Because over time, depending on the severity or the frequency of your drinking habit, sperm becomes misshapen. And then the mother's blamed for not being able to conceive. And it's not the mother, it's the father. So I often point out that all drugs, including alcohol, affect the sexual reproductive system to some degree. But the taboo issues of counseling, confidentiality is very real. But what we really need to focus on is the protective factors. And I just want to name a few. Love, love, love. Showing love and genuine love. Not love by gifts and money, but hugging your child. I love to hug my children. I love to be hugged myself. But hugs and love and affirmation. A supportive home environment where parents aren't arguing in front of children and cursing out each other in front of children. That is a no-no. If you want to do that, do it behind closed doors. But paying attention to the child's interests, whether the child is interested in swimming or hockey or whatever, or into the new technologies, showing interest and supervising homework, developing a relationship with your child's teachers. I made a concerted effort to get to know my daughter's plural teachers. And there were times when I couldn't get hold of them, but I would track them down one way or another, because I want to find out why is X having this problem and how can we solve it. So I made it my business to either get a cell number, or I will go to the school and try to find Miss X or Mr. Y. The values in the home, you know, things like even having a meal together.
Yeah.
I know we can't always be together because of sometimes work schedules, but even if it's once a week that we have breakfast together or dinner together, but that bonding is very important. And it's also an opportunity to talk to your child. Interactions in the car or on the bus are very important, but many times the parent is in the cell phone and the child is looking in the cell phone. I see it at restaurants. You just have to look around, and everybody at the table is into their phone and there's no communication. Well, what I normally do is say, look, why are we here?
Makes no sense.
Let's put all the phones down, and because what's the point? We could have stayed at home. And teaching children self-respect, that they must respect themselves, conduct themselves in a certain manner, respect elders, and respect, respect other people, and also adding value to community life, getting involved in volunteer efforts. I mean, the parish ambassadors, we have so many programs being offered where young people can now be mentored to become entrepreneurs, to become, I saw some children being exposed to aquaponics recently. I still think that we have a lot of good going for us, but there are many pockets across this country where children are lonely, they are depressed, and they find comfort in the block, because that is where the love is coming from in a negative form.
Well, Ms. Chaderton Shaw, thank you so much for sitting and chatting with us today. I appreciate you being transparent about your own experience as well, and all of the work that you have been doing over the years.
Lisa, I thank you so much for taking interest in this subject. I felt very strongly that the mental health and emotional support components and what I was hearing coming out of the homes was important to share with the public. And I think we really need to reset. We need to do a reset and get to understand, as I said, parenting is serious business. It's not a dolly. It's not a toy. And it comes with a cost.
And I thank you again for sharing. That was Miss Tessa Chaderton Shaw, an educator and former manager of the National Council on Substance Abuse. I am Lisa Lord. You are watching One on One. Do have yourself a wonderful evening.